Of course. Of course, the Warriors would lose to the Milwaukee Bucks, who has no Giannis on the team tonight and no Kevin Porter Jr. Two missing starters, and the Warriors lose to this team anyway. I stayed up all night editing the Quinton Post film breakdown so I can provide that for you guys prior to this game. Got 3 hours of sleep, woke up to watch this game. For all the wonderful things that we saw out of this team against the Clippers, it all went away. No lessons learned as usual. No momentum to follow. It's a brand new game. Let's just go and do completely different things this time. I think I just have to live with the fact that as long as Steve Kerr is the head coach of this team, the Warriors will never truly prosper the way they should. They will continue to underachieve, and this season is probably going to be a damn roller coaster ride. Honestly, I don't even have the energy to be mad right now. But there is a lot to go over, starting with Steve Kerr and his mistakes as usual, the nonsensical small lineups being overly relied upon, and how as long as the Warriors keep doing that, it is impossible for them to yield consistent results. The nonsensical 12-man rotation that Steve Kerr continues to run as if he didn't learn that lesson last season. He tried it in the early part of last season. It worked early on, and then it became a disaster. And it took many games before Steve Kerr decided, oh, okay, I can't run a 12-man rotation anymore. But he's doing it again, not realizing or understanding that nobody can truly get into a rhythm and a flow of things when they're being played 4 minutes, 10 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Steve Kerr thinks he's being nice by playing everybody, but the truth of the matter is that he's limiting everybody by having everybody constantly coming in and out of the lineup, having no idea when they're going to play, having no idea how long they can stay for. And in the case of a guy like Quinton Post, after having the incredible game that he just had, couldn't play more than 10 minutes in this game as a starter for this team. No logical explanation. The guy is a +3 in 10 minutes of play and never to be found again after the first 5 minutes of that third quarter. Meanwhile, Buddy Stinkaroo Hield can still see 17 minutes of playing time in this game, continuing to be a part of nonsensical garbage defensive lineups. The Warriors have no POA. The guys that truly can play POA are not getting consistent playing time in this game. Ryan Rollins, former Warrior, is completely going off and outplaying Steph Curry. Boy, you want to talk about a two timeline, all these young guys. And then of course, they end up letting go of the one guy who ends up being the best out of all of them. What's really sad about Ryan Rollins' development is that he's a two-way. He gave Steph Curry problems in this game, and he's a really good player on both ends of the floor, and that's the kind of piece that the Warriors could really use right now. But instead, he makes them pay, has an unbelievable night, probably a career night. Talk about payback. But anyway, we'll go through all the details as necessary, and if that sounds good to you, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and hit that like button so that this video gets out to all the Warriors fans out there. And again, be sure to check out the Quinton Post film breakdown. I posted it earlier today. I think it will paint a really clear picture of who Quinton Post can be for this team moving forward. Okay, so let's get straight to this game. The Warriors allowed the Bucks to score 120 points. After allowing the Clippers to score 79 points, they allowed 120 points to the Bucks. And I wonder why that is. What makes the Warriors a good defensive team versus a questionable or an inconsistent defensive team? I think the answer is pretty clear as day. The bigger they go, the more reliable their defense becomes, the more reliable their interior defense in the paint becomes, and then that defensive energy becomes infectious. But once again, Steve Kerr ran like a bazillion different lineups that were just suboptimal, not strong defensively, has holes, constantly causes mismatches all over the place. You got 3 guards in the lineup. That's how you end up with a mismatch where Steph Curry will be on Miles Turner. You run 3 guard lineups, you're constantly risking mismatches all over the place. You'll allow offensive rebounds that just shouldn't happen because you're just too small. And then sometimes there are lineups where the Warriors just don't even have a POA out there. I mean, you think about what Ryan Rollins did to the Warriors defense tonight, and maybe now you can see why I keep talking about the importance of having an elite POA on the team. You need an elite POA in the starting lineup. The Warriors don't have one. I will get to some of the details of what happened in this game, but we have to talk about the broken fundamentals of Steve Kerr first, because what happens with the Warriors on the floor is a direct result of his decision making. You're supposed to reward great play. Quinton Post showed great play against the Clippers. So, in this game, he should have been rewarded with an opportunity to play more than 10 minutes in this game. Let's think about this. In the first quarter, Quinton Post sits out after playing a little under 5 minutes. And you're gonna have to wonder why that is. Because Quinton Post was playing really good defense once again. The Warriors were up 11-8. Post was a +3 at the time. Why are you taking him out without letting him play 5 minutes of the quarter? And then, something really wonky happens to begin the second quarter. You guys know, I always talk about this, that Jimmy Butler unit, Potts, Moody, Butler, Draymond, and Post, that's where Post gets to come back into the game and have another opportunity to make an impact in the game. But without any logic whatsoever, Quinton Post is suddenly not in that lineup to begin the second quarter. Guy Santos takes his spot. Moody is also not in there. Will Richard is in there. And next thing you know, Quinton Post never gets into the game again in that first half, outside of the first 4 minutes and change in that first quarter. This is horrible coaching. As a coach, you're supposed to reward players who play great for you. You're supposed to reward them with more playing time, not less playing time. But that's exactly what Steve Kerr ended up doing. Look, I think Guy Santos should play. And I think Guy Santos should play over Buddy Hield. There's no reason for Steve Kerr to be rolling out this trash lineup in the first quarter and this trash lineup in the fourth quarter, and Guy Santos is nowhere to be found. And then you have Guy Santos randomly eating into Quinton Post's minutes to begin the second quarter. What? And then to begin the fourth quarter, Guy Santos, once again, is nowhere to be found. There is no consistency in the things that Steve Kerr is doing, and it's really hard to build chemistry like this for the team. I mean, look at these minute distributions here. Guy Santos 4 minutes, GP2 3 minutes, Moses Moody 10 minutes, Quinton Post 10 minutes, Will Richard 12 minutes. What are we doing here? And the worst thing about it is that the guys that played the least minutes were all in the plus. Guy Santos is a +5. GP2 is a +4. Post is a +3. Meanwhile, Potts can play all day 26 minutes. Buddy Hield plays 17 minutes. Why? Because Steve Kerr has his favorites and he's just gonna play some of these guys no matter how awful they are. But some of these other guys, they do one thing that Steve Kerr doesn't like and they're off the game. You want to hear something crazy about Buddy Hield? Buddy Hield shot like 5 of 10 in the first game of the season. He's since shot 1 of 15 from the 3-point line. What kind of 3-point shooter and what kind of shooting threat has these kinds of insane lulls and still get all the rope in the world from their coach despite not being a two-way player? You guys know I have a serious problem with these stupid 3-guard lineups. When Steph Curry's on the floor or when Potts is on the floor, Steve Kerr's got to choose between GP2 or Buddy Hield. Choose one of them and stick to it, bench one of them, and then have 3 forwards on the floor bare minimum always. I say you leave GP2 in the game along with Guy Santos to replace Buddy Hield so that they have more rebounding, more hustle, more defense, more screening, more floor balance. But no, Steve Kerr just has to screw around. Do some kind of nonsensical thing every single game. Just once in my life, I would like to watch a full Warriors game where I get to enjoy the process of what they're doing without wondering, what the hell is this coach doing right now? And by the way, I feel like all the kits were inconsistent in this game. And for as well as they played in the homestand, this is a thing. Can you stay consistent even when you hit the road and you hit hostile environments? Because yeah, usually role players tend to not play as well on the road. They don't travel well. Although I will say at the end of the day, Moses Moody only played 10 minutes. And again, it's hard to get into any kind of rhythm when you're only getting 10 minutes. The guy is a 5th-year player and he can't get a consistent role for this team. Jonathan Kuminga put up a lot of good stats. Scoring-wise overall, he was very efficient. But I'd be much happier if he scored more like 16 points instead of 24 while doing something to be able to lock somebody down on the other end of the floor. The Warriors need two-way play from him. He's often being used as a POA, and I don't see anyone getting locked down because Kuminga is on them. I don't care about the offensive numbers if the other team is doing whatever they want on the other end of the floor. And again, at least a lot of that could be mitigated if the lineups were better, if they were better protected, and in tonight's case, most of the time, it wasn't. And a lot of these wonky lineups, and with Al Horford at the center spot, they have not been good enough. Al Horford was a -20 in this game. You know, there are moments when he can be really good, and I do still believe that he'll be a vital piece for them as a closer guy at that center spot. But he can't protect a bunch of these lineups because he is almost 40 years old. He's never been a gifted rebounder. As a matter of fact, he's a little bit of an underwhelming rebounder. So actually, he needs rebounding help when he's on the floor. And Steve loves putting out lineups where there isn't enough rebounding. And Horford has no help. And how about in that third quarter, Steph Curry had his game going. He scored 10 points in that quarter. And then Steve Kerr decides to yank him way too early, being completely robotic, doesn't care about the rhythm and the flow of what is going on. Next thing you know, the Warriors go for over 4 minutes without scoring a point. Over 4 minutes. Leave it to Steve Kerr to destroy his own team's momentum always and constantly. The quarter ended passively because Jimmy Butler in the final minute scored 5 points, including an impossible 3-point shot with a hand in his face, and then getting himself to the free throw line with 1 second left in that third quarter. Credit to the Bucks, they played really tough defense. Jimmy Butler had a hard time, 7 of 18 from the field, and it seemed like he was constantly posting up against somebody bigger, like a Bobby Portis or something, and that's not an advantage to Jimmy Butler. If the Warriors played a bigger lineup and Jimmy Butler is at the small forward spot, then he has a better matchup advantage in general as as a small forward rather than a power forward. So when Jimmy Butler doesn't have it going with some of these second units, those second units kind of become useless. Clearly and especially when they're on the road. And Steve Kerr's terrible lack of trust and patience when it comes to the players that are supposed to be in his rotation. Again, it is practically impossible for anybody to truly get into any kind of rhythm. And how about that James Williams, huh? James Williams. I think they call him Gucci Mane or something. That guy, without fail, finds a way to cheat the Warriors. That guy, someday, refs in the NBA will get investigated. And if anybody might get into trouble, it's gotta be that guy. Curry is getting draped, grabbed, fouled, and of course, things are not getting called for him. There was a shot he took in the fourth quarter. He made an impossible shot. It should have been an and one, and instead the ref erases the 2 points, no free throw, saying that the foul was on the floor, literally shaving points in a really tight game. And again, instead of riding Steph Curry when he's hot in that third quarter, Steve Kerr sets him too early. Of course, Steve Kerr hoping Steph Curry would bail him out once again, and Steph Curry just couldn't get it done. There was just too much defensive pressure. There was just not enough defensively for the Warriors. Curry had some untimely turnovers down the stretch. Couldn't really get going offensively. This stuff tends to happen when the Warriors go smaller. They lack enough screeners on the offensive end of the floor. They can't stop anybody on the other end of the floor. There's a lot of pressure on both ends of the floor to execute, and the Warriors are simply too small. And we've seen this team fizzle out over and over and over again over the last 3 years, now going into year 4 of Steve Kerr and his crazy obsession with small lineups that are just inconsistent and non-viable more times than not. Just because the greatness of Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler being on the same team together overcomes the adversity of a lot of things created by Steve Kerr, it doesn't mean that really good things are actually going on the floor at least half the time. And man, the transitional lineups that Steve Kerr was putting out there really hurt the Warriors in this game in that first quarter. Again, the Warriors got out to an 11-8 start with Quinton Post in the starting lineup. And then they proceeded to let the Bucks go on something like a 14-2 run, and ultimately lost that quarter 26-14, outscored by 12 points with Quinton Post out of the lineup. That is why the end score of the first quarter was 34-25. And by the way, I don't want to take away from the good moments that Kuminga had in this game. He led all scorers at halftime, I believe. I think he had like 16 points and 4 rebounds. He did a good job being really efficient and keeping the Warriors in it scoring-wise. But at the end of the day, just like I do with anybody else, I can't baby Kuminga just because he's good on one end of the floor. The Warriors are trying to be title contenders this year. That means your best players have to be two-way. And they have to be a consistent two-way. They have to be able to contain the other team's best player. And see, when you don't or are not able to contain the other team's best player, as they were not able to with Ryan Rollins tonight, the result is that you lose to that team despite the fact that they don't have Giannis and they don't have Kevin Porter Jr. It's pathetic. That's why defensive viability and having a guy that can limit the other team's best player is the most important thing if the Warriors want to be true title contenders this year. And Kuminga is being asked to play a huge role in that regard. And so that means we have to hold him to the highest standard possible. That is why Buddy Hield's one way is unacceptable to me. That is why Pod's often not being good enough defensively is also a big deal. You know, an interesting quote came out from Kuminga recently in an interview, and he kind of insinuated that in the previous years, Steve Kerr would just kind of go silent on him and not explain to him what went wrong and what he wants from him, and instead just benching him without really telling him anything. That is the definition of bad coaching. You don't even communicate to your players what you need from them and explain to them why they're playing or not playing. People paint Steve Kerr as this super empathetic and super nice and kind guy. But you look at his behavior in a lot of different ways, and this guy is really foul. And he does this to a ton of players on his team. No explanation, just randomly puts him in a game or yanks him out of a game. No rhyme or reason. It doesn't make sense for the players and it doesn't make sense for the team, but he'll do it anyway. And that's not some small issue. That is a fundamental issue that has been keeping this team down for years and years and years. Having said that, we need to evaluate what the players on this team are doing right and what they're doing wrong. You need to first identify where you are weak and what is going wrong before you can look to correct those issues. If nobody addresses these issues, then nobody's ever gonna know about them. And the same issues and mistakes will continue to happen over and over and over again. And that is not what we want for the Warriors. I don't work for the team. I don't have to be silenced. I can say everything that is the truth, good and bad. And that is what you need if you want to be at the highest level and if you want to correct the obvious problems that exist within this team. And yeah, the biggest biggest problem right now is Steve Kerr's continued obsession with small lineups, his favoritism of Buddy Hield and Potts, and now Will Richard. And no matter what, he's going to continue to roll out some 3-guard lineup that just can't play consistent basketball. And as long as those things continue to happen, the Warriors are going to continue to yo-yo between good and bad, good and bad, good and bad. And the ability to do what they did against the Clippers, not going to happen as long as Steve Kerr continues to screw around with a guy like Quinton Post the way he did tonight, and as long as he continues to put out lineups that are limited defensively. And there may be random times where those smaller lineups happen to work out, but I promise you, it's never going to be consistent. So that's the state that we're in right now. Obviously, a terrible start to the road trip. They still have 9 more road games to go in their next 11 games. Great. Isn't it interesting how one night you can score 98 points and win that game by 19 points? The next night you score 110 points and you still lose by 10 points. And by the way, we got news about DeAnthony Melton. He's going to be reevaluated in 3 weeks. Man, they can't get him back soon enough. But when he does come back, my God, what will Steve Kerr do? Will he just run a 4-guard lineup instead of sitting a couple of guys and somehow find a way to run a regular rotation and not a clown rotation? I'm so sick of this guy yo-yoing with the fan base's emotion like this. Anyway, that's all I got for tonight. Sorry for the bad vibes. If you want better vibes, be sure to go check out that Quinton Post film breakdown. Nothing but good vibes in that video. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back on Saturday night against the Pacers. I'm gonna go get some damn sleep now. Steph Curry is the GOAT.